Welcome to Pop Americana. My name is Ryan Ashley Wall. I am your host, and I am joined tonight by Byron Lafayette.
Hey there.
And his Windows sounds. And Drew Tavares.
That's me.
We will be talking about the second half of The Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, because the first half is long, and the second half is also long, because this is a very long film, and we could not manage it in one part. So before we get into this, though, I'd like to ask you to like, subscribe, share this, click the notification bell, and leave a comment. Like I said in part one, I know that the Tolkien fandom is very knowledgeable and will correct us where we err and will insert all kinds of trivia. I totally welcome that. Granted, I have probably seen the behind the scenes of these films an embarrassing number of times. Even so, there are times where I've forgotten things from years ago and learn it all over again, and these films just continue to amaze me. So please leave a comment, if not for me, then for many other Lord of the Rings virgins who are finding out how great this series is for the first time. All right, let's get right back into our analysis. Where we left off was where in the extended edition, if you have a physical copy, there would be a disc change after the Council of Elrond. And in the extended edition, we come to a nice little scene where Elrond is doing a voiceover of Aragorn looking at his mother's grave, indicating, of course, that Aragorn was raised in Rivendell for a long while, which is how he knows Arwen. And we touched on it a little bit last time, but I think we didn't do a little better justice of talking about Aragorn and Arwen this time and their relationship, because even though it's not much in this movie, it's important for later. So with that being said, we have that absolutely stunning view of them on the bridge in Rivendell at night, and they're just talking in Elvish, which, like, Tolkien created these languages to sound excellent, and you get that, like Viggo Mortensen and Liv Tyler talking Elvish is just good stuff. Like, I could listen to that as that's probably what Gandalf's ASMR moth message was like.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, like you touched on, they don't really show too much of it. And you get a sense of feeling that they've known each other for a long time, but I definitely think later on in the series, you really get a lot more from their relationship. So just judging off of the Fellowship of the Ring alone, there's not really much there.
Yeah, it's pretty basic. It's pretty much,
yeah.
Oh, we've known each other for a long time. We're in love, and isn't this great? And I hope you come back from your journey safe. And there's not a whole lot to say, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't at least mention it.
No, I kind of feel the same way. There's not a huge amount there, but what I did really like about it was that it, what you said, it created the backstory a little bit, and it just kind of goes into what I love so much about all three of the films, but especially the Fellowship, because it takes time to breathe. It's not rushing from one set piece to another, or one event to another. That it takes the time to just be like, hey, we're going to listen to these two people chat a little bit, and get a little bit of a feel of who they are and their feelings towards each other and such. And so that's really what I appreciated, was that it just took the time to slow down for us to kind of just watch these two people interact.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I can't overstate how much that the Elvish in this film just sounds so good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a silky smooth language to begin with, but I think it's delivered convincingly. I don't speak Elvish, so I don't know how well spoken these lines actually are, but to my ear, it sounds really good, and that's about as best as we can hope for. And Aragorn and Arwen's relationship is going to be expanded and given more wrinkles as time goes on in these films. And I think it was wise because most of their interaction is flashback. Um, and most of it is actually happening around this time that we see. There's even a scene in the Two Towers that takes place shortly before they set out. And it was wise to hold that for the Two Towers because we need to be reminded that Aragorn has Arwen on his mind, and that relationship is still going. So it's kind of undercooked here, but we needed to at least establish it and have it in the back of our minds going forward. But before we leave Rivendell, we also have one other very important scene, and it is both heartbreaking and terrifying, and also just extremely sweet and bittersweet. It's everything. This scene has the whole human emotion spectrum, and that is Bilbo giving Sting and the mithril coat to Frodo. It's made even better if you've seen The Hobbit or read The Hobbit, because then you know what these objects are and what they mean to Bilbo. But my goodness, Ian Holm and Elijah Wood in this scene are just. Elijah Wood is again, he's kind of got a hard job of being Frodo because Frodo is, in a lot of ways, less interesting than most of the people around him. But that doesn't mean that Elijah Wood's not doing a good job of it. But man, Ian Holm's Bilbo in this scene, man.
Oh, man, sorry, there was a little bit of noise in the background there, so I just wanted to pop on. But anyway, yeah, going off of what you said, that it's kind of interesting because I'm thinking about how you mentioned that Frodo is almost like not as interesting as some of the other characters around, and I feel like that's kind of the case when it comes to a lot of heroes in books. Sometimes they're not as interesting as the villains or their friends. Like a lot of people said that about Luke Skywalker in the beginning, like the first movie. They're like, well, Han's more interesting, or Leah's more interesting. He's just kind of your straight good guy, and Frodo is kind of that way.
Ron and Hermione are more interesting than Harry, so on and so forth.
Exactly. And I think that this scene between the two of them, kind of helped to enforce, Frodo a bit more as a more interesting character, gave a little bit more insight into him. And also too, just, it was impressive of just seeing, seeing Elijah Wood, keep up in, acting wise with Ian Holm, that because sometimes when you're watching a movie, and there's a more experienced actor with a less experience, you can totally tell, it's like, but with this, yeah, you couldn't. It flowed really, really good. So it was a scene I enjoyed.
Yeah, and Elijah Wood has a lot of scenes with Ian Holm and Ian McKellen in this movie, and there's one coming up that is just chef's kiss, excellent. But we'll come to that when we get to it. Yeah, the other like famous part of this is when Bilbo urges Frodo to put the mithril coat on, and Frodo's unbuttoning, and then there's the ring, and Bilbo is just immediately affected by it, and there's that terrifying face morph that happens. But and a lot is said about that, and it's a great effect, and it is a great jump scare in the middle of a tender scene. But to me, my heart breaks for Bilbo in the part where he's saying, I'm sorry you must carry this burden. I'm sorry for everything. And then, he's just crying. And I think he is in that moment realizing that what this thing is doing to him, it will be doing to Frodo. And that's a hard thing to pass on to someone, it's like saying, here, I'm a crack addict, and you're going to have to be in order to do what you need to do. So knowing the challenges that come with that, it's kind of hard to pass that on to someone. he feels a sense of responsibility to the situation that is honestly unfair to himself, you know. But gosh, that the way he portrays that is like an old man with deep regret, and it's good. It's just good.
Yeah, it's definitely a departure from the Bilbo that we saw at the beginning of the film. Who's a more lighthearted, kind of this like kind of crazy old man. And we're seeing a little bit more of kind of the real younger Bilbo. A little bit who's weighted down. So it was great.
Yeah, that scene always gave me like nightmares as a kid. Like whenever he like went like like did that terrifying face. And yeah, but like it is like such a great like calm before the storm, because this is right before they're gonna set out and go on like the real adventure to bring the ring to Mordor. So yeah, I think it like sets the stage perfectly for what's to come.
Yeah, this movie does a lot of preparing us. Like I said in our first episode about spending a lot of time in the Shire helps you to feel the stakes later on, because you are intimately familiar with the place that they love, and this is in a way similar. There are people they're leaving behind that they're protecting. They're and it also contributes to a sense of history to this world. If you haven't seen The Hobbit, then you're curious, like this little old guy has had a lot of history here. If you have seen The Hobbit, you know that history, and that just makes his addiction to the ring and his regret of passing it to Frodo even more heartbreaking. But yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna go along and say that's true, because I had actually seen the Hobbit movies before I'd seen Lord of the Rings. And so it was very interesting kind of going into it and kind of having a little bit of that experience almost. So it was fascinating.
Yeah, man, like I wouldn't trade my experience with this film for anything in the world, but it would be interesting to be in the mindset of somebody who saw The Hobbit first. I don't know what that's like. So that's one good reason to have you here. But yeah, the Fellowship is about to set out from Rivendell, and if you're watching the extended edition, there's this great little scene as they're leaving Rivendell, where Frodo is in front of the party, and they're leaving past the gates, and he's like, Mordor, Gandalf, is it left or right? Gandalf's just like left. Which is both a funny line, but also by the end of this movie, when Frodo is removed from all that guidance, just like, dude, walking out the gate, he didn't know where to go. So the Fellowship leaves Rivendell, and we have like what could be a very boring shot of people walking past a boulder, but through Howard Shore's incredible score, through the cinematography, through the incredible establishing helicopter shots, this is like my favorite travel montage ever. Like, and New Zealand is just gorgeous. That Middle Earth is almost a character in this film. Like, gosh, man, I think we haven't talked enough about Howard Shore's score in this film, because the music from this trilogy and from The Hobbit, I'll say, top notch. Like, I can count on one hand the number of films whose scores are in the same league. It's just everything is given incredible attention to detail. There are operatic sections spoken in Elvish in song that reference songs from the books. There are just these incredible leitmotifs used to represent people or cultures or the ring itself. And this Fellowship theme is going to keep coming back that we hear in this scene. I think I think this is the most grandiose it gets until basically the end of Return of the King. Because this is the Fellowship at the height of its power, setting out from Rivendell. There's a ton of optimism because nothing has yet gone wrong. There's unity of purpose in the group. It's just good stuff.
Yeah, I'll just like kind of add on a little bit to what you said. I freaking love the score of these films. Like, yeah, like there's hardly any trilogies that kind of match the same level of quality. And like I think what's so great about the score is every single track in the film, like kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like kind of completes like the tone of the scenes, and it fits the aesthetic, and it adds on to like emotion, and kind of just like it makes you feel like you're a part of that adventure in some ways. And like, yeah, this whole like montage, just that track specifically is probably my favorite in the entire trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some more I like more, but I mean, I can't fault you. It's a good choice. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of good choices amongst these soundtracks. So like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you you're dumb for that one because you're not. You know.
And I agree. Like the score is just incredible for this film. Like, you know, one thing that I always gauge a movie off of with score is that can I listen to the score without the movie and still enjoy it? And does it still move me? And is it still a good piece of music? And without a doubt, 100%, you know, the score is absolutely fits that bill and is spectacular. And, you know, I honestly, you know, I can only think of a handful of other scores that aren't even as good, but still, you know, like I can think of like Gladiator, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean, whatever, you know, with these scores that stand on their own that are just fantastic. But the Time Machine, the remake of it, but yeah, just, you know, the score is just absolute a giant. You know, it just stands among soundtracks.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting that it's Howard Shore, because you hear this and you would automatically assume it's one of the legacy names. It doesn't sound like John Williams or Hans Zimmer. I'm not saying that, but it's of the caliber. You know what I mean? It's like this is something that you would expect, the quality you would expect of a Hans Zimmer or a John Williams type composer. Like I said, it doesn't sound like either one of them. They have distinct sounds that are not found here, but my goodness, this will stand the test of time. I think this will be a score for the ages, and it has. I mean, it's still great. It's still great. Anyway, they've left Rivendell. We have that great scene on the cliffside where they're kind of debating where to go, and and Boromir is like teaching Merry and Pippin to fight, and they like Hobbit tackle him and stuff.
I love that scene.
Yeah, it's so good. And then they trip Aragorn.
Yeah.
And of course, Gimli is trying to convince Gandalf to go through Moria, which is, you know, obvious foreshadowing, but still. And I know I promised I wouldn't do this a lot, but there is a bit of a change here from the movie and the book, where in the book, it's Aragorn that is against going through Moria. And Gandalf is kind of the guy going, you know, we should try Moria, which, you know, they argue about it for a bit. And of course, Aragorn says something to the effect of, you know, if we do go through Moria, beware, you know. And as they come out, knowing what happens, Aragorn's like, I really wish I hadn't said that. You know, like it's pretty rough. But here it's changed so that, and one thing I mentioned this change because you see this through the movie. they said that they wanted to make Fellowship of the Ring in particular Frodo centric. So this is why things like Tom Bombadil were scrapped. Anything that built on, assisted with, or furthered the journey of Frodo as a character was included. Things were changed to make that fit too. And this Moria thing is one of them. Because we have the really cool and also very memeable Saruman on top of Orthanc summoning the storm. There is fantastic YouTube content related to that moment.
Oh yeah, I remember like one of the most classic ones is when he's singing remember the troll song, like one of the really
yes.
Yeah, there's one where he's like singing the troll song and like him and like Gandalf are like going back and forth, and it is so funny and dumb, like even to this day. Like that one is one of my favorite. Like I showed that video to a non-Lord of the Rings fan, somebody who'd never seen the movies, never had any interest in movies, and they were laughing and like wiping tears from their eyes laughing. It's just good. It's such a good video. That's but within the context of the movie, it's another instance of Saruman being your typical 90s 3D puzzle wizard.
It's so true. He's so extra in everything he does, you know.
And speaking of extra, Legolas being on top of the snow.
Yeah.
Like everybody else is like waist deep. The hobbits are neck deep, but like everybody else is like waist deep in snow, and then Legolas is just walking on top of it, and you're just like, what? Legolas gets a lot of special action hero treatment in these films, including a lot of one-liners.
I can't wait till we get to the surfing scene next week.
That'll probably be 2 weeks from now, because Helm's Deep is a long thing.
Yeah.
Honestly.
but yeah. There's the surfing, there's the Oliphant, there's the snow, there's the troll here in a few minutes. Like Legolas is just defying gravity and all the rules everywhere he goes. But the Khazad scene is pretty cool. And they decide that Saruman singing the troll song on the wind and striking down the mountain, not a good plan to go through. So they decide to go into the mines of Moria. But before they can get in, they come to a very pretty door.
This is like probably one of the coolest set pieces. I mean, just Moria in general, but like I freaking love this scene with the door, and like it has like so much mystery, because you know, like Gimli was kind of like hyping up like Moria, and he's like, oh, it's like this great like dwarven icon, like it's very like lively and all this stuff. And they get to the gate, and like it's like really quiet, like kind of a little bit creepy and mysterious, and it's all like foggy outside. And then they, you know, end up finding out that there's like a riddle to get into the gate. And so they're like trying to figure that out and everything. And yeah, like it just like, it has like so much like mystery behind it, because like once they get through the gate, like they find out some pretty crazy things.
Yeah. I love the like you said, the set design is just fantastic, and the door to Moria. Granted, it's pulled straight from the book. Like this is one of the few things where there's like actually a graphic. Like there is a page of this door, so it's pulled straight from the book. But even so, like the writing of the moon runes on the door itself are just, it's so pretty. And I mean, that area, like you said, it's very creepy. And the water, there's that pool of water right near the gate, and Aragorn is kind of freaked out about it, and Merry and Pippin are throwing rocks into it.
Yeah.
There's going to be a theme for Pippin, by the way, going forward, just so we know.
I was like, do not be throwing rocks into that pool. Yeah, I was like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, if I was there, I probably would be doing something similar. Like, I just don't assume that there's a giant crazy octopus of death in the water, even though in this setting you probably should. But yeah, gosh, man, that's we hit another action sequence because they get in. Frodo solves the riddle, Elvish word for friend, melon. They get in, and all of the dwarves are dead. So they decide, let's leave. Let's not go this way. When what is called, not in the text of the movie, but we know from the book and from notes related to the movie, it's called the Watcher in the Water, which is a terrifying name for that. Because I'm just thinking it's just a dumb octopus beast, but the Watcher in the Water implies an intelligence that I don't want to think about. You know, like,
yeah, it's almost like some kind of guardian type creature.
Yeah, it's a Lovecraft monster just swimming in the pool nearby. And yeah,
like, what is an octopus even doing in mountains anyway?
It's a big, scary freshwater octopus. Like, I don't know. And we're in a world with orcs, so I guess it works, but it's a big nope monster. The first of a series of big nope monsters.
Yeah.
This will soon become a theme.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, but yeah, that I like that little sequence though. And one cool thing is like the sound of the tentacles. The way they got that is they got a plunger and soaked it in water and just shook it. So it's like it's you can't unhear it. It's a really gross sound.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of great sound design that we're coming up on too. That's just this next level stuff, man. Next level stuff. So then we go into Moria, and again, we're just gonna praise set design for the rest of this movie, because it's got great set design. And yeah,
gorgeous. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even when it's not supposed to be, like this place is dark and terrifying and fills you with an existential dread at every corner. We just had our Eldritch Abomination at the gate that, by the way, locked them in, like destroyed the door. So they're just stuck in this place where we now know the dwarves have died. There's skeletons everywhere. And Gandalf tells them, and it's easy to forget this because we're watching a 4-hour movie if you're dealing with the extended edition, 3.5-hour movie if you're dealing with the normal one. But he says it's a 4-day journey to the other side. I don't want to spend 4 minutes in there.
Yeah. Oh man.
Much less 4 days. Ay.
Yeah, because you think, like, what is it? The average person, walks at, what is it, like 3 miles an hour or something like that, So then you think of, you multiply that, by 1 day and then 4 days. You're like, oh dear God, how big is this place?
It's huge. And also they're going to be moving a bit slower because they have hobbits in tow. So their stride isn't quite as long. So yeah, it's goodness gracious, what a, like, of all the things that happen in this trilogy, except maybe Mordor, and even then Mordor is at least outside, but I think of everything the Fellowship faces, this place would be my least favorite.
Mhm.
It's underground. The civilization that was there is definitely gone. And we find out fairly recently gone. Granted, with some context in the book, what it was is a recent effort to retake it has failed, not that the whole thing recently went belly up. It's that, well, it's been belly up for a long time, and they tried to do something about it, and it didn't go well. Which is an interesting parallel to The Hobbit, because The Hobbit is essentially about a dwarf kingdom that fell and their quest to reestablish it. And what we see in Moria is that same quest, but it failed. And that's sad. Especially since, and I guess we shouldn't get to that yet, but we come to a tomb of a character from The Hobbit. So that multiplies that connection, multiplies that sorrow. But before we go there, we have a very, very important conversation, as Gandalf is another great meme where he says he has no memory of this place.
Yeah.
So good.
Those images of him looking left and then looking right, looking lost and confused. Yeah. That's another one on the meme counter.
Yeah.
I should have edited in a meme counter this whole time, but that's an error we can correct in the future.
Because honestly, you think of kind of how almost terrifying, that is, because you think, Gandalf is, how many eons old, it's and he's, there's somewhere in the world that he's never been, and is slightly freaked out by it. It's kind of scary when you think of who he is.
Yeah. He's been there before too, and he's kind of turned around. And if he's your guide through a 4-day journey through that's the last thing you want to hear. Yeah, this conversation with Gandalf and Frodo is, I think, thematically the heart of the trilogy. First, we find out that Gollum has been following them. Mm-hmm. And I think Gandalf says that he's been tracking them for 3 days. So I don't know if this is the final day in Moria. I don't know. But either way, he says Gollum has been tracking them, and Frodo is kind of freaked out about it and is like, it's really a pity that Bilbo didn't kill him. And Gandalf corrects him, because Gandalf has seen Gollum, has talked with Gollum before, and we in the Two Towers will soon see Gollum. And from the prologue and from this scene, you would think Gollum is a lot like these orcs and is just a scary thing, but it's much sadder than that. And Gandalf explains that it was pity that prevented Bilbo from killing him, and that may not be such a bad thing. And Frodo then has this moment where he's like, I really wish none of this were happening. And Gandalf gives that age-old great advice, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us, which is not only great life advice, but I think the mission statement of this entire series is, bad times come upon us, bad circumstances are thrust upon us, and it doesn't really do well to wish it away. You got to do something about it, and it may even be hopeless, but ultimately it's better to assume that it's not and try. So I love
that conversation is awesome, and it is very true, like you said, that it's like, you don't know what's going to come along, and you just kind of have to make your way through it. It almost reminds me a little bit of a quote from a character from the TV show Lost, where he says, it was the Mr. Echo character, and he says, like, I didn't ask for this life, but I did with it what I could, and it's just you don't have control over that stuff. And yeah, that just conversation is very special. And again, it just kind of goes back to what I said before, that I love these quiet moments that this movie brings to us, because it just gives us so much more depth of these characters.
Yeah, depth, and like also, I mean, the very next scene we're going to see is going to bring us to the height of high fantasy, and this grounds us with, but they're people, living out in this world. They may be wizards and hobbits and dwarves and elves and men, but they are people. They're like you and me. They have struggles, they have doubts, they have fears and worries. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. This isn't like even The Hobbit, which the film tone is a bit darker than the book, but even so, even the film, the Hobbit films, I should say, are lighter than this and not quite as heavy. It has its moments of heaviness, but this is crushing weight. It's kings and wizardry and sorcery and monsters, and that can feel alienating. But we have these rich characters that are not perfect, that even our wizard, our great angelic wizard of a being, is, human enough to get lost, and I think that's important, because what we're about to talk about next is a ton of action and a little bit of horror, because as Drew pointed out, Peter Jackson started in horror, and it shows with the Nazgul in the first half of this film, but in this back half of this film, it shows in creature design, it shows in scenarios, and it shows in our next bit, which is where they discover the Tomb of Balin, and Gimli has a bit of a breakdown, and Gandalf reads from a book again. Just excellent, well written. It's trimmed down from the version in the book to be like, if they had just released this monologue as a trailer, that would have been great. A shadow moves in the dark, drums in the deep, like, we cannot get out, they are coming. Like, somebody wrote that trapped in this chamber thinking, oh, we are so dead. And if you look too, like, at the book, like, the last line trails off really bad, like they were writing when they got hit. Like, that sucks, man. and the intense, like, the tension of all that it's not even broken. It's that it's like it's tensing up with this dark story. And bear in mind too that we've been spending quite a bit of screen time in Moria with nothing but corpses, and haven't seen anything that caused these corpses. And we have this scene where it's just tense. Gandalf is reading, and then instead of releasing that tension, instead it just gets tripled because Pippin drops that thing in the well and then like drags the skeleton down. It takes a comical amount of time and makes a ton of noise.
It's the loudest bucket in history.
You're trying to get like shredded cheese at 3 a.m.
Or back in the day, like my computer now is quite quiet, but it used to be you turn on a computer at 3 a.m. and in addition to the volume, like all of a sudden the fan is just and That's the kind of feeling you get, like you're trying to be quiet and it's just like opening a bag of chips or candy at the movie theater. I feel like it's just, you know. But yeah, that bucket scene sticks out, and of course everybody hates Pippin for it. But that is the most relatable. Like, I love Billy Boyd's face, like as it's going down, because he's just like, and then like when the bucket like clangs at the end, he just goes, like. And then there's that, again, like great timing on all this, because then there's that good pregnant pause. And Gandalf slams the book shut and he's like, Lavatuk, like, and tells himself to throw himself in next time. Rid us of your stupidity. That is harsh words from Gandalf, but let's face it, well earned. Because our next sequence is an action sequence in Balin's tomb where they have a cave troll.
They have a cave troll.
What do we think of this action sequence? Because we are about to hit action sequence for a good bit here, but it's three distinct ones. So let's segment this out. We're going to have the Tomb of Balin, and lumping into that where they go out into the main hall and then the orcs swarm like roaches. And then we have the escape on the narrow staircase of like the OSHA violation from hell. And then we have, of course, the Bridge of Khazad Dûm. But let's start with this Balin's Tomb segment. What do we think of this first real fight for the Fellowship, where it's not just a scary thing that came out of the water and surprised the crap out of them?
I think I'll be brief, but yeah, I think it was really cool because it kind of set the bar, I guess you could say, for what the action was going to be like for this trilogy, because we'd seen a little bit of it, in the prologue and some of the other stuff, but this is kind of when we got to see everybody, using their own skill sets, and got to see the fighting styles of different people, and we just got to see how the fights were going to look basically going forward. With the cave troll was just entertaining, and there was a little bit of comedy here and there too, with Legolas, and stuff. Just overall, I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. I freaking love this action scene. And I love how it kind of shows each skill set of each of the characters, because they all have different weapons. And, when they were meeting together during the council, there's a whole like, and my axe and my bow and my sword. You like see like all of their skill sets like being put to use here. And also this is where you get to see the purpose of the mithril vest, because Frodo gets stabbed with a spear, right?
Yeah, it's a really, really big spear.
Yeah. He just like gets impaled, and he lives because of the mithril vest. And so like that whole sequence with him, talking to Bilbo, getting Sting and the mithril vest, like you kind of see like why that, like what the importance of that was, and it like finally comes to fruition here.
Yeah, and the we didn't mention, but Sting glows blue when orcs are around, and that was kind of their tip off that, oh crap, orcs are coming. And then this sequence is really good. I think the creature design for the cave troll is phenomenal. It's not often that CGI monsters from 2001 stand up. And hold up over time, and this one is really good. Part of it is, the usual CGI trickery of we're filming in a dark space, so you can hide the imperfections a bit. Now, like there's one particular shot that hasn't aged well, where Legolas jumps off of the cave troll. Legolas is just like a completely CGI rubber man as he's falling down. But other than that, like it's just seamless and flawless, and I totally believe that creature is in the room with them.
Yeah. Also, the sound design of the cave troll is so good. Like the like growl that it does it's so iconic. Because I don't know. I remember like playing like Lord of the Rings games, and like as soon as you heard that, you knew what was about to go down. Like,
you know what a troll sounds like, which is a cool thing. Yeah, you're right. It's great sound design, and I wish I could remember. I think it's like a lynx and a baby walrus, like weird animal combination. It may be 3 or 4 animals. There's one coming later that I do know what they did, and that was you'll never unhear it. But this one is, I mean, whatever mixture they use, like the way trolls roar, like I can't produce that sound, not even close. So I'm not going to try. But if you've seen the movie, you know what a troll sounds like. They have a vocalization that's different and memorable and intimidating. And it is kind of a dumb creature. But you mentioned a bit of comedy, Byron, and I wanted to point out two bits of comedy that I always love, which is Sam, his weapon of choice is pots and pans.
Yeah.
He has a sword and he's just hitting things with frying pans, which is great.
I loved that part.
And the other one is when the troll is about to step on Sam and Aragorn and Boromir grab the chain and pull him back. And like Aragorn lets go, but the troll turns around and Boromir's still holding the chain, and he looks down and the troll just throws Boromir across the room. Like he has just enough time to realize what's about to happen before he's yeeted across the room.
Yeeted.
I love that moment. But also, despite like those moments of comedy, like there's a full-on decapitation with blood splurting out in this scene. Like it's still like, even though it's fantasy violence, it's pretty graphic for what we would expect in the genre. And even compared to The Hobbit, where there's almost none of that, there's decapitations, of course. And I think Battle of Five Armies Extended Edition is actually rated R. Now that's because there is like that. I know the exact reason that's rated R, and that's because there's a dwarven chariot with like razor wheels, and it just straight up confettis a few orcs. It's wild to behold. But I do like that this series, while like obviously I saw it when I was young, Drew saw it when he was a baby.
Excellent.
Like even though like really young people saw it, it kind of doesn't pull the punches with the violence. Like it's not like over the top. It's not stylized like 300 with blood splurting at an unreasonable amount in every frame. But there is blood, there's gore, there's decapitation, and it's like, oh, this is pretty interesting standard, because from the front half of this film, you wouldn't know that necessarily is coming around the corner. Now, obviously, if you watch The Two Towers and Return of the King, you know that, it's going to get fairly violent. But even so, I think the image of Aragorn straight up decapitating that orc in here, and like just the stump where his head is just squirts out blood for a minute before it falls over, may be the most graphic image in this trilogy.
Well, because it's interesting, because you look at this as like a PG-13 movie, and then you look at also how like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was also PG-13, and you look at like the complete differences in the combat between those two movies. Like I like the combat in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe; it's good, but it's like comparatively, when you look at the graphicness, it is you definitely see it with Lord of the Rings, how it's more.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings is a lot more gritty than Narnia, I think, which is not a bash on Narnia at all. it's just they're going for different things, you know. But they leave the chamber, and there is yet. I mean, we're just going to talk about. Oh, there's a cool shot. There's a cool shot. But that's because that's how this movie is, you know. But the shot of the Fellowship being surrounded by these goblins that are like coming out of the cracks in the ground and coming out of the ceiling like roaches. It's just crazy what's happening. And I love how, even though they are hopelessly outnumbered, you got to give it to Gimli because he's just like, yeah, so what, the whole time. You know, but gosh, that is a cool, and that is
visual. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also accomplished by CGI. And what's funny is of a similar time frame to The Matrix Reloaded. And Byron, we were just talking about that on your podcast, and like it doesn't feel the same as Rubber Smiths in a courtyard. Now, again, to be fair, like they had the balls to try that in the broad daylight, where here, you know, you have the benefit of being underground in the dark, and it's also a fantasy creature. So if it looks a little inhumane, that's fine. But even so, even with all those caveats, it still holds up. It looks pretty darn good with all these roach orcs.
Oh, yeah, it's a great scene, and then I just love the this is probably skipping ahead a tiny bit, but I love the tension when they run away, and you're like, oh crap, you know, it's like, oh
yeah. That first off, that's a perfect segue. And second off, yeah, like I think it's a way of we already had a bit of foreshadowing with the Balrog, where Saruman was doing his like, oh, you fear to go into those mines, and there's like the illustration of the Balrog in there, which is, you know, a very obscured illustration, which is good because you want to save the creature reveal for the moment. But then we get the name of the Balrog dropped here. You know, the orcs scatter. There's that ominous red glow. And this is where I want to tell y'all. The roars for the Balrog were accomplished by having concrete slabs pulling apart.
oh
So it like, honestly, in a few minutes when it like jumps out at Gandalf and roars, you hear, and it's got kind of like a fire crackle kind of quality to it. You'll never unhear concrete scraping against concrete. Like it sounds like a creature roar, you know, but once you know that that's what accomplished it, you're like, oh, that's cool. But even here, like you have another fantastic Sean Bean line. What is this new devilry?
yeah.
Because there's
And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I read that the Lord of the Rings, that they had that for the flames of the Balrog, that they had to create their own CGI for it, that there wasn't any like fire CGI that had existed before. And that was amazing to me too, because I was like, this looks good and it holds up really well. And it's like they had to invent this, you know. It's like
yeah, so much was pioneered by these films, and I think we'll probably get into that more with the Two Towers, because there is one thing in particular in the Two Towers that is everywhere today, but was almost exclusively unique, new, and incredibly refined by the Two Towers in Return of the King in the motion capture of Andy Serkis. But there is a lot of things like that for this whole trilogy. And the Balrog is definitely one of them. Before we get to the Balrog proper, though, there is a bridge sequence where they are running downstairs, fleeing the Balrog, and there's like I said, OSHA violations from hell. It's just an open staircase onto a pit that would make Emperor Palpatine blush. And there's that neat moment where like the orcs are firing arrows at them, and Legolas does that cool shot with the arrow, and the camera is tracking with the arrow as it hits him dead in the center of his head.
So good.
It is. And again, we're gonna get a lot of Legolas just doing incredible things in this film, which is compounded in The Hobbit, but that's another topic altogether. But yeah, this sequence famously in the script said like the Fellowship runs down the stairs. And this is what Peter Jackson came up with.
Oh, man.
I love with Peter Jackson. I love that he takes things that are very average and stuff, and like you said, fleeing down the stairs, and turns it into a cool action sequence. It reminds me a little bit of like The Hobbit with the barrels in the river. And it's like what could just be boring. Oh, run through this area. Turns into like a cool action sequence. And you mentioned the tracking arrow that stood out to me. I really liked that because you didn't see that a lot in movies back then, especially with the fantasy ones. Like we see a lot of that now. But yeah, that was pretty new.
Yeah. And there's the whole tension of like they're jumping over that gap in the stairs, and then like a part of rubble just cracks the other half, and it's just like teeter-tottering as Frodo and Aragorn have to jump across. There's the great nobody tosses a dwarf moment.
Yeah. Oh man.
That was a great line.
Which comes back, of course, but
Yeah.
and notice too that Gimli is saved by Legolas grabbing his beard. The start of a beautiful dynamic. Like Legolas and Gimli are the power couple of this. Like Frodo and Sam, sure, whatever, they're great. Legolas and Gimli are A-tier bros as well, though. So they're not there yet, of course. They hate each other right now, but they'll get there. But the part we really want to talk about, I think, is the Bridge of Khazad Dûm itself, which is just another OSHA violation waiting to happen because it's the most narrow bridge imaginable.
Oh, I just wanted to see a sign on the other side that's like 0 days without an incident. It's like,
And again, with good book context, it was designed to be narrow on purpose as a defense. So like you could only come across single file in the case of invaders. Neat defense. Terrifying thing to have to cross though. So yeah, the Bridge of Khazad Dûm, they cross over and the Balrog catches up to them, and Gandalf, of course, stays behind to confront this incredibly beautifully rendered creature that looks like it could be an antagonist in Doom.
Yep. And not the movie with The Rock.
No. I feel like the design philosophy of Doom 2016 was look at Balrog.
Yeah.
Everything is Balrog.
Yeah.
But my goodness, that creature design, so good. I think it may be, I'd have to think about it because there are some other incredibly good creature designs. But as far as like force of nature villain kind of thing, like I'm not talking Caesar, Planet of the Apes, but like if you're talking like a monster, genuine monster, the Balrog may be my favorite in a film. And it's quintessentially demon, like it's horns and wings and fire. But the execution is so good. Byron, you brought up the pioneering the CGI fire, but there's also the like smoke effect that's around them, the like billowing darkness that comes off of them, and man, the whip and the sword are both just excellent. What do we have to say about this scene? Because this is a pivotal moment in the story, I think.
You go first,
Yeah.
Drew. I've gone first.
All right, yeah. Yeah, like you said, very pivotal moment. So they're trying to cross this bridge, but Balrog is like kind of stopping them and in the way, and so Gandalf kind of like takes the lead on this because he's like, oh, this is my forte. I know magic. So he walks up in front of everyone, and there's the like super super iconic scene, which is also a meme. You shall not pass, and he slams his staff into the bridge, and it snaps in half. And then like basically Gandalf sacrifices himself to save the rest of the eight, to continue on to the journey. And this whole like sequence like somehow still holds up. I mean, it's not perfect obviously, but like for 2001, like just seeing Gandalf go down and jump after Balrog and fight him is insane. Like, because if you look back at like any other film released in that time frame, there's nothing like it. It looks incredible, especially when you get that like really like far out shot of just seeing the like fire like go down in like this dark pit. So iconic.
Oh man, I there's so many good scenes in this trilogy, but I think I can safely say that this is probably my favorite scene in all three films. It's so iconic, it's so epic. There's a few moments that just really stand out. Like I love when the Balrog reveals itself fully, to Gandalf, and I love how the flames like go out almost like wings. It's just so beautiful. It's so hideously ugly but beautiful at the same time. It's like, and I also love I love the interaction, between Gandalf and the Balrog, because like, yes, it's like, this is demon creature, but it's also like, kind of alluded that it has some type of intelligence too. And like Gandalf knows what it is. And, I love like there's the, look here, I think it's the quote, at the end, where he says, go back to the shadows, it's just like such a great line. And with like Gandalf, when it tries to hit him with the sword, he like puts his shield up, with the staff. It's just like so cool. And what I also kind of liked about the scene too is that this was kind of our first introduction to high fantasy, because we'd seen the elves, we'd seen like the orcs, and even the cave troll a little bit and stuff. But like those creatures and those events are kind of showcased us as being somewhat ordinary and normal, in this world.
Mundane.
Yeah, mundane. Yeah, it's like, oh, a cave troll. To us, that's fantastic, but to them, it's just like, oh, it's a cave troll.
It's a big animal.
Yeah, it's a big animal. Exactly. It's like a giant grizzly bear or something to us. And it was really cool to finally see, this high fantasy creature that everybody's terrified of, that really no one has seen either. This is something that's like buried deep down, Durin's bane, and stuff. And so just like to see it, to see, this horrifying, thing of like, us seeing a dragon, nowadays is like them seeing the Balrog. And
the Balrog and Gandalf are of the same angelic order.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, in the cosmology of Middle Earth, they are of equivalent status, which is part of what makes this battle so appropriate, because you're dealing with a higher form of beings. You're right, though, Byron. This is the first, like, incredibly high fantasy. Like, the rest is that we've seen so far. Although you could argue the Nazgul were in the category of high fantasy.
True.
But this is another level. This is epic and fantastic and beautiful and terrifying and just something else. I think it really kicked a door in for nerd culture.
Very much so.
I don't think the MCU happens without something like Lord of the Rings showing that there's a market for this kind of thing.
Yeah. It's true, and I love the attention to detail too in the scene, because just like, at the end when Gandalf falls, off of the bridge, and the camera, briefly watches him fall down, and I love that they still kept that you can see the glow of the Balrog as it's falling, and you can just see it going down, 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 and it's just, like they didn't have to have that; they could have just shown him falling into the pitch dark, but I loved that they showed that because it just was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we have to deal with the aftermath of that.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the most deeply affecting scenes in the trilogy for me, which is full of deeply affecting scenes. So, that's high praise in and of itself. But you have them initially leaving Moria, like running in slow-mo. And then when they get out, you have like Merry consoling a completely destroyed Pippin. You've got Sam is like head buried in his hand, like lost. Even like Legolas holding Gimli back from running back in, and you got Boromir trying his best to kind of like comfort these people, which is, I think, worth noting because we skipped over a really important scene, by the way, earlier on Khazad, where Frodo had dropped the ring and Boromir had picked it up and it tempted him. And we see a lot of Boromir being tempted in this film. But if you pay attention in the action, he is always concerned about the hobbits. He's always looking after them. In this scene, like Aragorn is trying to get them moving because it's still dangerous. Like they're dealing with this incredible grief, but Aragorn as a leader is like, guys, we can't linger here. We got to keep moving. And Boromir is the one that is thinking of their emotional needs at the time, which is not something you would expect of Boromir, but he's the one that says, give them a moment for pity's sake. Again, not something you expect of Boromir, but the most haunting of all is just like Elijah Wood's just dead, vacant stare of just knowing that their best guide, their best chance is gone and taken from them very early in this journey. And that's all over Elijah Wood's face.
And also like the friendship that, Frodo and Gandalf had, like, because, like it was established already that they've known each other for a really long time. So like it's like especially more emotional for Frodo than anyone else.
Yeah.
The scene. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say this scene almost reminds me a little bit of like that one meme that we see with Simba when he's by the body of his father. And then it says like, how you feel when the tank goes down, in the boss battle, that's like almost felt it's like, they saw, basically they're their most powerful ally, their most powerful dude is gone. And it's like, well, what chance do they have now? If he's gone.
They were very reliant on Gandalf. Like he was carrying this team. Like, let's be honest, and that's done. And I will also note that the music here is, again, just anguish made in form, and not just anguish. It's beautiful, and I know that it's beautiful because one of my greatest memories of this music is not associated with this movie at all. It's the Man of Steel teasers, which use this Gandalf lament theme coming out of Moria. And I remember hearing that, and it immediately endeared me to the idea of Man of Steel. So, like, it communicated to me that, they're taking this Superman thing very, very seriously. But that's another series for another time. But
don't get me started on Man of Steel.
We'll be here another 4 hours. So yeah. But gosh, man, the dealing with Gandalf as they get out of the mines is good stuff. And I also note too that Pippin being that destroyed about it is probably a lot of guilt. Having dropped the the thing down the well, the corpse in the bucket and everything. So like it's not spoken about. It's not drawn. There's not attention drawn to it, you know. But you can see it all over the actors' faces. You know, Pippin feels incredibly guilty. Gimli is just responding the only way he knows how, with anger. Legolas too. I gotta give it because Orlando Bloom can feel kind of wooden in this role because he's such a detached elf. But there's a moment where we get a reaction shot of Legolas, and he's just kind of looking down, and you know, almost like the memes where there's like math symbols swirling around, and they're trying to compute something. It's an immortal being realizing this is what the sting of death is like, you know, and that again, like just that's conveyed without words, you know. It's just so good, so good.
One last quick point that I'd like to say. I won't go into it too much because it does deal with the other films. But you know, you were mentioning about, you know, Boromir, you know, being this kind of like more supportive, empathetic person. You don't really expect that. And I feel like that is kind of out of left field and strange in this film, but I feel like it comes back around circle where you understand him a bit more when you see his family in Return of the King, and you kind of understand what a hard childhood he had, and like, you know, some of the struggles he went through, which I'm sure we'll get into more later. And it kind of made sense a little bit more to me of like, okay, this is why he's a bit more empathetic, and why even though he has this tough exterior, he is a bit more soft, you know.
He's under a ton of pressure and stress that would on its own put a lot of people back on their heels, you know. And then you add into the fact that there's an eldritch monstrosity ring trying to corrupt his heart. So like, and instead of thinking that Boromir is weak, we must come to the conclusion that Boromir is us, you know. Like any one of us could be in his position. And I think the message of this movie, by the time we get to the end of it, is that any one of them will be, if given the time. But that's where we can't linger here too long, just like the Fellowship, so we have to go to Lothlórien. So with that admittedly flimsy segue, we reach Lothlórien, and Gimli has his famous "I have the eyes of a hawk and the ears of a fox." Oh. And he's teeing up Galadriel as this kind of scary thing, this elf witch. That's not exactly who she is, and he'll be the first one to tell you he was really wrong about this. But but we have Galadriel teased, and we hear her again because we've heard her in the prologue, and we have seen her in the prologue. And if you don't know who Cate Blanchett is, you may not have even noticed you saw her, because her voiceover of the prologue was not connected with the visual of her mouth moving. So if you're watching this for the first time, you may recognize the voice from the prologue and go, oh, that's the voice from the prologue. And you may not even, by the time Galadriel is introduced, recognize that she was one of the ones given the 3 rings in the beginning. Because that's a very, very, very brief clip. But we have this telepathic speaking where she's telling Frodo he brings great evil there, and it seems oddly hostile. And in the Fellowship of the Ring extended edition, it is openly hostile, because when Haldir first stops them at the border, there's a quite nasty exchange with Gimli where they are not getting along at all, and they're told they can't go any further, and Aragorn and Legolas are kind of like arguing with Haldir in Elvish, and the rest of them are just kind of like, what do we do here? And finally they're led into Lothlórien, which in the book is described as the Golden Wood, but here in the movie it's the very, very blue gray wood, but I don't care because it's gorgeous. And the music is great.
Yeah, it's definitely like a big contrast compared to Rivendell, which like Rivendell is very elegant and like beautiful, very bright and lively. Where how do you pronounce the name again?
Lothlórien.
Yeah, Lothlórien. It's like the complete opposite. I mean, it still looks beautiful, but like it's very like dark, kind of mysterious,
Solemn.
Yeah, very solemn. Like just a very different vibe compared to Rivendell, and you get the same feeling from Galadriel and like all the other elves there. They're very different than the Rivendell elves. And so yeah, it's a very like big contrast. And then also, if you've seen or read The Hobbit, you know kind of Legolas's kind of history with these elves and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's a bit of a sadder place, really, and that harkens back to a lot of backstory that we definitely can't get into. But the history leading up to this place, around this place, and then of this place after these events is deeply sad and beautiful. And I think that is something that Peter Jackson and his team really understood, because this place, and part of it is that they are also mourning Gandalf because these people love him too. Because who doesn't? I guess in Two Towers we'll find a few who didn't.
yeah.
but yeah, it's a deeply sad place, and I think that is pitch perfect for having just lost Gandalf.
Yeah, you guys pretty much said everything that I was going to say about it. It's like, it is a sad place. It's not, it's not quite, the beauty, the more joyous location of Rivendell. It's like, if Rivendell is Disneyland, then Lothlórien is California Adventure. So.
Somebody's gonna laugh at that. It's gonna be a narrow audience there, but
yeah.
So anyway, we meet Galadriel in person and Celeborn, who is kind of an afterthought. But I wanna tell a funny story about this scene, because I'm sure both of you and many listening or watching have seen they're taking the hobbits to Isengard video.
Yes, so good.
And there is a line. My wife Rachel and I were watching this at a friend's house one time, and we were in one room and they were in another. But we had the volume kind of up, so they could hear. And during this scene, when Celeborn says, "Tell me, where is Gandalf? For I much desire to speak with him," we could just hear a chorus from the other room of, "Tell me, where is Gandalf? For I much desire to speak with him." We just started laughing right away. So that's another one for the meme counter here, because they're taking the hobbits to Isengard has some scenes here as well as the Two Towers. But the actual scene in its context is again quite sad, with Galadriel mentally talking to everyone while she's welcoming them to Lothlórien, which feels again weirdly hostile, because Boromir in particular is not taking it well, and it's just this weird thing where she is physically speaking to them, but in their minds they're hearing her voice and it's saying something else, and it's affecting them all differently. She tells Gimli not to be too troubled by what happened to Moria. So she's not openly hostile to everyone. She's not even really openly hostile to Boromir, because as we'll find out in a minute, what she said was encouragement. And what he's feeling as hostility is that, like, he feels he's being sold a bill of goods. Like, he doesn't feel encouraged. Which again goes to Boromir's character, which in this second half is just incredibly well done. But Cate Blanchett is exuding an absolute regal aura with Galadriel. She seems like a queen. Like, she has been at this for a very, very long time. And she is both wise, mysterious, and also vaguely threatening. So kudos to being able to capture all that in a performance, which we see more of with our next scene, the Mirror of Galadriel, which is another dip into high fantasy as we get into water prophecy. And let me just say, like, how many takes did it take for the things that were, things that are, like the rising and falling of the pitcher? And, like, first off, props to What a Workshop on that pitcher, because that's a really, really elegant pitcher for just pouring water into a basin.
Mm-hmm.
But this
in my mind, like, Peter Jackson went on like a 30-minute like rant about how the picture had to look. That's just that's my head canon, is that.
Well, it's like this, like, elegant, like, narrow-throated bottle, and then it's got a perfect taper, and, like, it's just, I don't know, the prop department on these films went way above and beyond the Call of Duty, such that, like, it kind of shot the foot of fantasy after this, because so much else just feels cheap in comparison. And man, this scene is no exception. We have Frodo being beckoned to look into this freaky mirror and seeing what Galadriel sums up as what should happen if you should fail. And that sounds crushing, except she comforts him with, even the smallest person can change the course of the future, which is another, like, thesis statement for these films. So much is depending on these little hobbits, not kings of men, not wizards like Gandalf, but very, very, very ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And Galadriel also has that freakish moment where Frodo offers the ring and she goes full control I, evil Galadriel, be like,
Yeah.
That scene was freaky.
That's another scene that freaked me out as a kid.
Yeah, I think what they did, and you guys in the comments will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they, like, slowed the frame rate down to, like, an obnoxiously low frame rate. And of course, they brought that deepness to her voice by, bringing it low. And then, of course, I said Control I, but it is a little more doctored than that, but it does look like a lot like inverted colors. And, it's a little goofy. But at the same time, I give it a bit of a pass because so much of this movie is just not goofy. And it is at the same, it feels of the same genre as Bilbo's transformation, where it's like, oh, this is freaky. Why is this happening? It's been a while since we've been terrified by something. So Peter Jackson just decided Galadriel was going to be that for a minute.
It's true. And it's kind of like sometimes when we see these characters who are, like, infinitely powerful, they come across as just kind of strange, and just, like, terrifying, but weird and quirky, because you think of, like, Gandalf, he's just this kind of strange kind of guy when we first meet him, and then it's like, Galadriel, we get this image of just, this, like, terrifying wraith monster thing, that wants to go toe to toe with Sauron, and then of course in the books, you have a Tom Bombadil. I warned you he would be coming up again. Who's another dude who's just like so powerful, and is just kind of just a freak, it's
He's like a powerful jolly man. It's like,
yeah, just like puts the ring on, has no effect, takes it off,
he's like hippie Santa Claus.
Yeah.
But but also before the Fellowship start to leave Lorien, there is this cool scene that I really like between Aragorn and Boromir. And Boromir is just kind of relaying to Aragorn how stressed he is over his position and how Galadriel tried to tell him that even now there's still hope. And he said, it's been long since we've had any hope. And then he starts talking about Minas Tirith in this beautiful way, he says that the Tower of Icthelion is glittering like a spike of pearl, and like the line about he said, have you ever been called home to the clear ringing of silver trumpets? It's like it's just like he's really selling Gondor as this beautiful place. He's like, this is this place we're at now is not my home. I love my home, and it's right near Mordor, and it's kind of horrible, and we do need the hope. But I love that scene because again, it highlights, even before we know the full background of Boromir, it highlights the pressure he's under to be a provider of hope for his people. There is an extended scene in the Two Towers that I know we're not talking about the Two Towers, but I do think it's relevant here, where he has just won a battle at Osgiliath, and like he and his brother are celebrating, and you can see like he is the guy that they're relying on. Boromir is a hero of Gondor, and that comes with pressure, and that pressure is compounded by this ring that's in his midst, and on his mind. And he feels like, if I had that, I could be the hope they need. I could actually turn the tide. I could not be fighting these little battles where we have pathetic victories that get swept away next week, and that I think is important to his character. He has so much hardness against him. And if you're watching the extended edition, we also get the scene where Galadriel is giving gifts to the Fellowship, knives to Merry and Pippin, the rope to Sam. Of course, in the theatrical cut, there's still the phial of the light of Arendelle that she gives to Frodo, which, if you're watching the movie, makes almost no sense and is completely without explanation. And if you're reading the book, also makes no sense and doesn't have a clear explanation. It's only if you've read the Silmarillion that you have any idea what this is other than a flashlight. So, nonetheless, it's a very pretty prop. But do we have much to say about them leaving Lothlórien? Oh, they get the cloaks too. They get the really, really cool cloaks, and they're provided with lambus bread, which is basically like ramen of bread. Like, it keeps forever and is surprisingly filling.
Yeah.
I imagine it's tastier than ramen, but
the cloaks were super cool. They got those pimp clasps, on them, and
pimp clasp. It gives a visual cohesion to the Fellowship that they didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that is a design philosophy that goes for them from here on out. And before, they were all very, very, very different looking from one another, and now they have these cloaks that give them not a uniform, but a sense of uniformity. They feel like a fellowship finally, which is odd because they lost one guy. And in another way, like they're kind of aimless. They're counting on Aragorn, who was counting on Gandalf, and Aragorn, great leader, will be a great king, but is not Gandalf. I don't think anybody inspires quite the confidence that Gandalf does. And they leave and they get on boats, and they're very pretty boats. Then we get to the scene behind me, which is again incredible imagery. I think that was accomplished through miniatures and CGI. And I remember like the first image of this film that is burned into my brain is this one right behind me. The Argonath are huge, imposing, majestic, and mysterious. I know they're the faces of Arendelle and Arendelle, Lords of Gondor, Aragorn's forefathers. But still, it's just a really, really cool thing. It's like the Colossus of Rhodes meets, I don't even know what else to compare it to. I guess the pyramids of Egypt, it's just cool iconography built into the land, and you just wonder about these people.
Gives a sense of history to like the world building and everything.
Yeah. Also, I'm noticing for the first time this sword here. Is that Narsil? Looks a lot like it.
Yeah.
Looks a lot like it.
Might be, huh?
So, wow. I'm just now noticing that. But it also has, even though it's like sort of good news for them because they're technically in Gondor territory when they cross these, because they're like warning figures, it's ominous, and the music kind of does that too. Like, even though it's majestic even though it's majestic, the music is kind of, there's like an uncertainty to it, and it's just a good visual moment. Yeah, there's the scene, of course, is where Boromir, under the guise of collecting firewood, finds Frodo alone. Frodo is still kind of reeling from the whole losing Gandalf thing, and is incredibly unsure of where this road is going, what his next steps are, and kind of goes off to be alone. But Boromir follows him, and Boromir's intentions are not good. He wants that ring, and comes across, as Boromir often does in the background scenes, as like wanting to unload a burden from Frodo. And that's how he starts anyway. And then as Frodo pushes off the advances, he gets increasingly aggressive until he outright attacks him. And Sean Bean is just
Boromir is the epitome of that. Help me, help you. Help me, help you.
Yeah, and Frodo knows it like right away. He knows, oh, this is not a good place to be alone with this guy right now. Honestly, if I was Frodo, I'd have been sleeping with my eyes open around Boromir.
Yeah.
Like, and I've been a big Boromir defender, but let's face it, he's been suffering from this thing more than anyone. And again, I think that goes to the unique pressures he's under, which he talks about. He says, I wish only for the strength to defend my people. And that's when he gets angry,
Yeah.
And yeah, Frodo leaves. He puts on the ring, leaves, has that incredibly freaky vision of Barad-dûr, where it kind of like goes off into the direction of it, and it goes up Barad-dûr, and then you see the eye, and freaky moment. But I will also say, like, when Frodo first ran away, I love when Boromir kind of falls down and he comes to, and he's like immediately horrified at himself. You know, that's such a good moment. You know.
Yeah, because it enforces that he's not a bad guy, really. You know, he's not like a villain. You know, he's a good guy trying to do what he feels is the best thing to do, but he's going about it in all the wrong ways. And him coming to, I think, just kind of showcases that he really is a good guy. You know, because he suddenly realizes that he's falling right into the trap of the ring.
Yeah, which is all. I mean, it's working on him like a drug. Horrifying situation to have to be in. So,
yeah.
And obviously Frodo has it worse than anyone because he's got it hanging around his neck. So, you know, like, not saying that that Boromir is completely off free here, and I'm not saying that Frodo doesn't also have tremendous pressure. Indeed, the pressure of having to save the entire world on his shoulders. So I'm not giving Boromir a pass here, but like you said, Byron, like, it shows that he's not a bad guy. He's just under the influence of a terrible artifact. And as we see with the ring wraiths, men in particular are pretty susceptible to this in a way that the elves and dwarves were not, in a way that the hobbits are not. Now, I think anybody given time around this ring is not going to be okay.
Can you think of anything more terrifying than a hobbit ring wraith?
I don't want to think about that.
It's like an immortal chihuahua. It's like
oh, man. It's an evil chihuahua.
Technically you could overpower it, but you can't kill it. It's like
It's basically the leprechaun from the Leprechaun movies.
What a reference. But yeah. We have that, and then of course Aragorn shows up to Frodo, and I will say I love the way Viggo Mortensen says, "Where is the ring?" You could interpret it the way Frodo does initially, which is like, shit, not again. But in actuality, it's like, did Boromir do something to you? Is kind of the actual tone of it. And one thing we haven't mentioned that's been constant is the ring has a voice, like has audible lines in this movie. And the clearest example is here when Frodo has the ring in his hand and he's like, would you destroy it? And you can hear the ring say Elisar, which is Aragorn's Elvish name, and then say Aragorn very clearly, like enticing him. And the sound of the ring immediately stops when he closes Frodo's hand, which is a cool effect, you know, and of course shows Aragorn to be the awesome guy that he is. And at this point, Aragorn understands that Frodo is going to leave. Frodo tells him so, tells him to look after him, especially Sam. And then that's when they notice Sting is glowing. Because interspersed in here has been little tidbits of Saruman being like, I'm going to send orcs after them, you know, which I'm doing it no justice, but it's not been much except to establish this threat that's coming, you know.
More puzzle wizarding.
Yes. Yes, it is very much more puzzle wizarding. It's a weird term, and I'm glad we've come up with it.
Yeah.
But he's got these Uruk-Hai, which are like orcs, but they have the stature of men. They've got the stamina of men, and they're
The way they're birthed is disgusting too.
Oh,
yes,
so
yes.
gross.
It's
Just
like
digging through the mud, and then the like weird fleshy like
mud placenta.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh.
I don't know another way to describe it. It's just,
And they're more intelligent, right?
say again.
They're more intelligent too than the average orc as well.
Yes, they're more intelligent. They're stronger. They can operate under sunlight, which orcs can at an extremely limited capacity. But the Uruk-Hai don't care. They're indifferent to the sun.
They're just built different. Ford tough.
They're built different. they are indeed built different, and that makes them great antagonists. I will say later on when we're dealing with Mordor itself, I follow more the Saruman school of thought, which is quality over quantity. But Sauron is definitely the quantity over quality kind of guy. To be fair, it's a lot of quantity. but yeah. Say again.
Saruman is the CW of Mordor.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh. But what's not CW is the quality of the prosthetics and makeup on the Uruk-Hai. They are good. They look perfect today. Like they're just intimidating creatures. And we have the Battle of Amon Hen happens, where it starts with Aragorn doing that incredibly cool like side duck thing. And then he's being just swamped by these Uruk-Hai, which are largely indifferent to Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Boromir, and they're just after the hobbits. That's their instructions, find the halfling, bring them to Saruman. And they seem to only really engage with the others as a way to get them out of the way, to kill them and get them out of the way. So even though Aragorn is incredibly outnumbered and alone at the moment, he's not having to deal with being swamped by all of them, Even so, it's a lot, and it's a great action sequence because we have the action happening on 3 different fronts, basically. We have Aragorn, who will soon be joined by Legolas and Gimli. We have Boromir, and his action is primarily with Merry and Pippin, who are kind of a bridge between these 2 moments anyway. What do we think about this battle? Because this is the battle that kind of ends the film, the last action sequence of the film for sure, and takes place in this honestly beautiful like autumn wooded area. What do we think of it?
Yeah, just like the cave troll like action sequence, I love this one. This is probably my favorite action sequence in the entire film. Just I love the Uruk-Hai and like especially like Lurtz, like the leader with the like face paint and everything. They're just super intimidating. And not to say that the cave troll and like the goblins and everything weren't intimidating, but like you get a sense of like these guys are like way more powerful than the orcs that they were facing before, and the stakes are a lot higher now because these guys are specifically going after the hobbits, specifically going after Frodo and Sam, and so like there's just like a lot more, I guess, on the line for them now. And yeah, just the action here is absolutely awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is this this is where Aragorn catches the blade, right?
Yeah. When he hits the knife, it was intended to fly kind of past him, and they're using real props here, like
Yeah.
so the actor throws the knife and it's going straight at Viggo Mortensen. It wasn't supposed to. And Viggo Mortensen really bats it away with the sword. Like that moment wasn't scripted, wasn't planned, wasn't choreographed. And yet Viggo Mortensen had the reflexes and wherewithal to swat away a knife coming at him with a sword, which is just quintessentially badass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. That is one of those incredibly cool tidbits.
Yep.
And I love too that when Legolas and Gimli show up, they're already kind of functioning as a unit because Gimli like throws a small axe into someone's face, and then Legolas comes in shooting in the other direction. It's like, even though they haven't fully bonded yet, Legolas and Gimli are functioning as a 1-2 punch already.
Yeah.
But I think the showstopper for this, Frodo encounters Merry and Pippin, who decide to let him go, and not only let him go, but offer themselves as bait to the Uruk-Hai, which it's played for laughs because there's the "I know it's working, run," thing. But at the same time, like if we think about it, is incredibly heroic of these little guys, and not to be outdone in being incredibly heroic, here comes Boromir, because the hobbits are on the verge of being captured, and Boromir comes out of nowhere, and Sean Bean is just fighting the crap out of these guys. And my goodness, I what a great redemption moment. If not for like the action hero stuff, but the motivations behind it and the sheer like force of will we see from Boromir. Because as you mentioned, Lurtz, leader of these Uruk-Hai, shoots him with an arrow, and one isn't enough. 2 isn't enough. 3 turns out to be enough, but just barely. And my goodness, like the music, the choreography, the way like you can see this guy is like from the first arrow, he has accepted he's done. Mm-hmm. But he has not accepted that this fight is done. Yeah. And by the time the third arrow's in him and the Uruk-Hai are just streaming by him, I love the shot where Lurtz comes up to shoot him point blank, and Boromir is not closing he's just looking him dead in the eye like, yeah, I'm not giving you the satisfaction, of begging or anything. And we have Aragorn come out of nowhere and a great duel. Like the moment to moment action of this, of course, the awesome moment where they throw the shield and like,
oh yeah,
like the design of the shield could have been completely cosmetic, but the fact that there's like spikes on the bottom of the shield and you're like, what is that for? And then you're like, oh, that's what that's for. That's freaking cool. Goodness gracious, the fight between Lurtz and Aragorn is great.
It was a great conclusion to the film, because when a lot of the, especially with fantasy movies, you need a strong climax, and you need and within that climax, you want to see, a great duel between your hero or heroes and villains. And a lot of films fall short, with that or don't do it justice. But this, Fellowship really does do it because, it takes a villain who's relatively new. It's not somebody who's been introduced since the very beginning of the movie. He's a bit of a latecomer, but you get the feeling that he's super powerful. You've seen what he can do, and then just delivering this just action-packed, intense fight was just a perfect ending to the film. I loved it.
Yeah, he's been killing people since he was a mud baby.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
I think in a way we've sort of covered it. Drew brought up that excellent trivia with the knife, which is just, oh my goodness.
Mhm.
It's one of those movie things that you just can't believe happened, you know?
Yeah.
It's so cool. But yeah, Boromir dies. Aragorn yet again beheads an orc. Beheads Lurtz. With that, and another image that was ingrained in my brain is when Lurtz like pulls Aragorn towards him and he's like, ah.
Yes. Yeah.
That just cemented these guys as especially like bad for me. Like, I know what you're saying, Drew, that these were like the Navy SEALs of orcs, you know, like
Yeah.
Orc Team 6.
yeah,
Or Team 6. Yeah.
Oh,
oh my goodness. I was trying Delta orcs maybe.
Delta Orcs.
But yeah, like these guys are pretty tough, and so like seeing them defeated is incredibly satisfying. But again, more praise on the character of Boromir. The moment Aragorn gets there, he says they took the little ones. He's first off, Merry and Pippin been taken, and second off, I tried to take the ring from Frodo. He confesses like right away, like you can tell, big redemption moment. Like if the fighting to the death for Merry and Pippin didn't do it for you, then his graveside confession to Aragorn will. And Aragorn basically promising to him that he's not going to let our people fail is good. It's so good. And Boromir finally accepting Aragorn with the, I would have followed you to the end, my brother, my captain, my king. Good. I nearly cry every time. It's just so good. The way Legolas and Gimli kind of come upon the scene and just allow Aragorn and Boromir their space. But then we get to Frodo and Sam, which begins with Frodo kind of crying on the shore, which sounds pathetic, but given everything that's happened, I don't even blame him a bit. And remembering the words of Gandalf, you know, about it's what we do with the time that is given to us, and decides to finally set out on his own. But Sam, of course, will not let him go alone, because of course you are, and I'm going with you, which is it's a great, like obvious contradiction, but great line. You know, legendary bromance between Frodo and Sam, but also again carrying on this whole grief of Gandalf that's been permeating this back half of the film. When Sam is pulled back onto the boat, the first thing he says is, "Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee." You know, like he's remembered his promise to Gandalf, you know, that I'm not letting Frodo go alone, which is a huge motivator for Sam, in addition to being just a great friend. This part chokes me up a lot too.
I love this scene because like this is where you kind of first start getting a feel of where Sam's character arc is going to go, and how like he's like willing to like basically just sacrifice himself to you know, protect Frodo, because he didn't have to go with him. You know, Frodo was going to go alone. But you know, he's there, like that's his brother. He's like there to go with him every step of the way. And also this is where another fun trivia comes in, where whenever they start walking into the water, Sean Astin steps, was it on a rock or was it on glass? I don't know. He cuts his foot. Yeah, he cuts his foot in the water. And while they were like filming this scene, but you wouldn't know because they hit it pretty well. But yeah, just another fun little fact right there.
So there's, if nothing else, like if you watch these films and you like them, you owe it to yourself to watch the special features, because there is no film who the making of is better documented and more entertainingly documented. It is really, really, really good content.
Yeah. A lot of great laughs too.
Yes, like Viggo Mortensen's penchant for headbutting people. Like, just out of the blue, like, I'm pretty sure they're brain damaged cast members because of Viggo Mortensen headbutting them.
Oh,
there's like montages of him headbutting people.
yeah.
So good. But yeah, man. Frodo and Sam, that's one for the ages. And another scene, I guess, because the scene does end, or this film does end on Frodo and Sam, but it's kind of a postscript to this. What I want to end on is what made me most hyped for the Two Towers, which is the scene where Aragorn is putting on Boromir's bracers after they've sent him out over the falls in that really cool Viking burial. And Legolas comes in with the boat, and he's like, Frodo and Sam have reached the eastern shore. And Aragorn says, basically, we're not following them. And Gimli says, so it's all been in vain. The fellowship has failed. And Aragorn says that great, we will not abandon Merry and Pippin to torment and death. We travel light. Let's hunt some orc. And Gimli's yes is exactly how I felt. I'm like, yes, I want to see what happens next, because it ends on a slightly hopeful note, despite the fact that literally everything has gone wrong. Gandalf has died. Boromir has died. Merry and Pippin are captured. Frodo and Sam are going it alone. The three fighters have decided to try and save Merry and Pippin. They're not backing up Frodo and Sam. So it's like everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. And yet you get the feeling like, oh, we're down in the first round, but we're going to get them in the second half, which is not a theme that carries in as we go forward, because I think Two Towers and Return of the King are purposely more hopeless to their benefit. But I think to encourage people to watch a second movie in this, we needed to end feeling a little uplifted. Because in all honesty, the book doesn't end on an uplifting note. And if we take survey of what's happened, it doesn't end on an uplifting note. But just the music, the presentation is like, hey, we've had a setback, but we're going to win this, And by the time the Two Towers hits you with how hopeless everything feels, you're already hooked for Return of the King. So, and that's Fellowship of the Ring, really. So, real quick, let's talk our final thoughts and ratings. We have covered every scene there is in this film, with rare exception. And I say that, but I guarantee we missed a lot. Nonetheless, let's start with you, Drew. What are your final thoughts and rating? Let's do a 5-star rating system. So 5 being most and 0 being worst.
Definitely a 5-star. Absolutely. There's no questioning about that. This is, I guess, the film that's grown on me the most over the years. It used to be my least favorite when I was growing up. The Two Towers. Well, no, I'm not gonna say anything. But yeah. So the Fellowship of the Ring was not my favorite. Not that I didn't like it, but I liked the other films more growing up, but I've grown to appreciate it so much more over the years. And especially as an adult now, looking at all of the deeper thematic beats and especially like the character development, like with Boromir, for example. I find the films like a lot more like emotional now, especially like Fellowship of the Ring, like just Gandalf's sacrifice, Boromir's sacrifice. And yeah, like you said earlier, like the way it ends just perfectly leads into the Two Towers, and it's just like thinking about it right now, I'm so ready to rewatch it and talk about it next week.
Yeah, I'm very tired, and at the same time, I'm like, it's midnight. Two Towers could happen. It's so good. What do you think, Byron, of Fellowship of the Ring? Ratings and final thoughts.
Well, my rating is definitely 5 stars. I'd give it more stars if I could. It's just it's a spectacular film. It's a great adaptation of the book, and it's just it's a great film just on its own. Just looking at the use of how it was made, filmmaking wise, and as a fantasy film, just it knocks everything out of the park. And it's one of those rare movies where everything that could go right did go right. It's like, they literally, it was just, it's incredible. And and I'm very sad that I ended up waiting so long to see it. But when I did see it and watched it through, I was amazed by just every frame, and it pulls the emotion out from every character. You get to know everybody, you fall in love with everybody. You're riveted by the action. And it just Peter Jackson just had a masterful hand on it and just did an incredible job. And I honestly think that, people will still be watching this movie 100 years from now.
Yeah, it's sort of our generation's Lawrence of Arabia. It's like, it's something that it's an epic of unparalleled scale. The production quality is through the roof. I'm not going to break the chain. It's a 5-star film for me. I said from the beginning of this, we like this movie, and that's a huge understatement. This movie, and honestly, those special features I was talking about, ignited my love for movies. And the production value, every dollar spent on this film is on that screen at every moment, and not a penny was wasted. The sets are incredible. The CGI holds up remarkably well. But most importantly, they took the time to make these incredible characters, to form these arcs for 9 people, and yes, some of them are taking place over the course of 3 films, but even within this film, so much comes to fruition and comes to, a well done conclusion. And I don't think you could, normally I'm the kind of person that I don't like to critique something unless I have a suggestion of how it could be fixed with the original intentions in mind. The list for this movie, I don't even know that I'd be able to honestly put even one finger up to say, actually it would be better if, because the way this film plays out in my mind is as close to perfect as you can get. Obviously here and there's some tweaks that could be made, but
Tom Bombadil.
They amount to nitpicks so small it's not worth mentioning, and that's the highest praise you can give a film. But with that being said, let's lead people out with some plugs, or one plug anyway. We do have the Pop Americana Facebook page and discussion group, but more importantly for this broadcast, because if you're watching Pop Americana on YouTube, you probably already know about the discussion group, or at least would be interested enough to find it. But the other one would be Under the Lens. So Byron, you want to talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, thank you. So I have my own podcast, Under the Lens. And I do interviews with interesting people. I do movie reviews, and I also just talk about flights of fancy of things that I like in pop culture. With films, books, anything like that. So it's one of those it's one of those shows where I'll say, not necessarily every episode is for everyone, but there is something for everyone. So I hope you will come and check it out. And we also have a page on Facebook under the Lens with Byron Lafayette that you can like, and we post all of our episodes on there. And that has the latest updates for the podcast.
Excellent. And I'll put links in the description as well. So if you didn't catch that, it's there. All right. Well, join us next week where we continue this epic saga with Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Looking forward to it. Thanks. And please remember to like and subscribe and share. And of course, comment away all the trivia, every Sean Astin foot cut and every Viggo Mortensen broken toe. Send us your broken bones, you're weary, yearning to be free. We want your trivia, not just the trivia, but just talk about this amazing film. Or if you hate it, honestly, I don't care. It's your opinion. You're free to hate it. You're wrong, but you're free to hate it. Leave us a comment.
We're just going to cast your opinion into the Mount Doom.
Yeah.
Yes. We don't have to go that far for it, though, do we? I mean, is it worth it? It's got no actual power. You have no power here.
Encounter.
All right. Well, have a good night, day, whenever you're watching. This has been Pop Americana. Join us next week for The Two Towers.